Hey y'all, welcome to the Pungo Prairie. Now I know what you're thinking. Dixon, where's your hat? And some of you others are saying, look, he ain't bald after all. But I tell you what I'm saying, this old body of mine, it ain't as well suited for driving in a well as it was in my younger years. But I needed to get some water over here to the garden. Now talking about water, I bet all you waterfowlers out there got a freezer full of ducks and geese. Now as soon as I get this last pipe set, I'm gonna fix up a big old pot of my world famous Pungo Prairie Canada Goose and Dumplings. And I'm gonna show y'all how to fix it too. So don't go nowhere, cause you don't wanna miss this. Now we're ready to cook. Now this is about as simple a recipe as you're going to get for a Canada Goose, other than just breasting one out and grilling it up to a nice medium rare over a bed of applewood and pecan coals. Now let me tell you about what we got going in our pot. Of course, we got a nice dressed out Canada Goose that I took out of the freezer a couple of days ago. Them boys must have scared this bird to death because I don't see a shot bruise in it nowhere. Some nice fresh herbs from the garden. A little bit of celery we're going to dice up and put in there along with some carrots. Probably going to dice up a potato. We're going to dice this up an onion, and you know we got to dice this up a turnip and put in there. And some poultry seasoning. And I like to mix it up a bit, so I'm going to put some of this corn that I canned from the garden last summer. Now the first thing I'm going to do is take this bucket of water, I got 4 quarts, and add it right on into our goose pot. And fire up the burner. And we'll give our goose a nice sprinkling, a little rub down with a generous bit of sea salt. You can use some kosher salt. Get the backside too. And add some fresh ground pepper on it. And a nice sprinkling of our poultry seasoning. Rub that all in there good. Get some more on the backside. And now we're going to take our seasoned down goose and right down into this pot where it's covered about halfway up with the water. Now we got these fresh herbs from the garden. We got a couple of sprigs of rosemary, a nice bunch of parsley, and about 6 or 8 sprigs of thyme. And we got it all bundled together here with a little string to make us a nice little bouquet that we're going to drop right in our pot along with that goose. Now the reason we tied our herbs together in a bundle with that little string is it'll make it easier to retrieve the stems later, which we're going to discard. Now the leaves, they're going to fall off into our stock, but that's okay. And about a tablespoon or 2 of some minced garlic. Now we're going to add in a couple of bay leaves. We're going to bring our pot to a boil. Put the lid back on it, and we're just going to let that goose simmer there in that pot with the heat turned back to low for about 5.5 to 6 hours. Okay, it's been about 6 hours. Let's check on our goose. She's looking good to me. We need a little more seasoning. I'm going to give it another about 1.5 teaspoons of poultry seasoning, about 1 tablespoon of some sea salt, and 2 tablespoons of some white sugar. Give that a little stir around in there. Now I don't like to start out with too much salt, because salt is something you can always add later. Now remember, we started out with 4 quarts of water. So I don't think the little bit of salt that was on that bird in the beginning and another tablespoon is going to be too much. Now a little bit of sugar going on in there always helps to enhance the flavor and make that stock a little more tasty. Now I'm just going to take our goose out of the pot here, drain it off a bit, and set it right over here in this little dish so it can cool. Set our pot back on the stove and fish out our bundle of herbs there now that have all done their job. Turn the heat back up, bring our pot back up to a boil, and just let our stock kind of simmer there for about another half hour or so. Let that stock reduce down a little bit and get a nice hearty flavor going on in there. Now that we've allowed our bird to cool a little bit, I'm just going to cut it up here and pull all that nice tender meat off the carcass. See how those thighs and legs just separate right on off of there? Break that backbone away and just start kind of picking the meat off there. All that nice tender goose meat. Now we're going to discard the skin. We've got some more over here on this side. That little sweet pocket right there. Isn't that nice? Break apart the thighs. Get that leg meat off of there. Whoa, it's still a little bit hot. Cut down either side of that breast. Peel that breast right on back. Get that breast severed right on away from there. Now we're going to pull apart these nice 2 goose breasts. Now we got us a nice platter full of goose meat. We're just going to set aside for the time being. I'm just going to ladle over a little bit of our stock here so our goose meat doesn't dry out. And cover it up with some tin foil. Now you can make this part optional, but I got all the bones and the skin and the carcass that was separated out from the meat. And I like to capture every last bit of essence of flavor that we can. So I'm going to add all the bones back into our pot. There's still a lot of flavor to be released. Now this of course is going to mean we're going to have to strain our stock before we add our vegetables and our meat and our dumplings into it, because we want to make sure we don't have any bone fragments or skin or undesirable pieces in our finished stew. Now we're just going to get our vegetables all prepared. Peel up this turnip. And in goes our diced up onions, potatoes, carrots, celery, and that turnip. And about a 1/4 cup of chopped up fresh parsley. Give it a little stir around. Now we're just going to bring it back up to a boil. Put the lid on it. Let everything simmer there in that pot with the lid on it for about 20 minutes. Pull the lid back off, and we're just going to add all our nice goose meat back into our pot here. Open up our little 1/2 pint jar of corn here from the garden last summer and add in our corn. Give it all a little stir around. Now right here, I like to take a product called Total Seasoning and put a generous sprinkling of that in that pot. Maybe about a teaspoon. Now I get Total Seasoning at the Restaurant Depot. And if you don't have Restaurant Depot near you or access to one, you can always try the next best thing, which is Montreal chicken. Now she's starting to look like something. Put the lid back on it. Let our goose and corn kind of warm back up in there over a nice low heat while we make up our dumplings. Now of course you can use Jiffy Mix or Bisquick for making up your dumplings, but I don't think you can beat whipping them up from scratch. Now we're going to take a cup of all-purpose flour, dump it in that little mixing bowl. 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of white sugar, and a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. And we're just going to blend all that in there together with this little pastry cutter. Now we got us 1 tablespoon of some cold butter. We're going to add our butter to our dry ingredients. And cut the butter in there with this little pastry cutter and get nice little chunks of butter all dispersed throughout our flour mixture. Get it all cut in there nice and even. I'm going to make me a place hollowed out in the middle here and add a 1/2 cup of some whole milk. And we're going to get us a kind of a wet little dough going on here. Not wet like you're going to drink it, but a little bit wetter than if you was going to cut biscuits out of it. Just want to blend it all in there together. Get that dry flour off the sides of our bowl. Now I've let our dumpling dough rest in this mixing bowl for about 15 minutes. That way it gives a chance for that baking powder to get a little rising action going on in there. And we're just going to drop them from this spoon into our boiling pot. Cover it back up with the lid, get a tight fit, and we're just going to let our dumplings steam in that pot with the lid on it for 15 minutes. Now you don't want to be taking the lid off and taking a peek, because that's going to screw up your dumplings. You want to try to keep enough of a boil going on in there to get a nice steaming action so those things will rise up and be nice and fluffy in the middle. It's been 15 minutes. Let's see what we got. Now that's what I'm talking about. Now let's just dish up some of our nice stew into our bowl here. Get some of that goose going on. Oh my goodness. One more nice piece of goose. There we go. Right there. How about that? Some of these nice plumped up dumplings. Now I like to cook up a few frozen green peas to put along in there with it. And I like to add them at the end so they don't cook up too mushy. Spoon some of our peas around in there. Give it a little color, a little extra flavor. And for a finishing touch, garnish it off with a little bit more of this fresh chopped up parsley from the garden. Pour us a glass of my favorite white table wine, Our Dog Blue. Dear Lord, you have created the fowl of the air, to which we marvel at their grace and beauty, and to provide for us sustenance. Bless this food now to nourish our bodies and strengthen our spirits for a life in Thee. Through your Son Jesus we pray. Amen. Now you know I've been dying to dive into this. Let's check out this dumpling. Look at that. Nice and fluffy, tender and light inside. Oh my goodness. Now I'm going to tell you something. That right there, that's just some good old down-home country comfort food. A little on the wild side. And that, girls and boys, is what's cooking on the Pungo Prairie.